There is a sound that history tries to bury. It isn't the sound of a sword hitting a shield, or the roar of a general. It is the sound of bone scraping against bone. Outside the ruins of Nishapur, there is a pyramid. It is not made of stone. It is not a monument to a god. It is a stack of human heads, thousands of them, sorted with the cold precision of a merchant counting grain. Men, women, children, distinct piles, no overlap. Most people look at this and see madness. They are wrong. This wasn't madness. This was an audit. This was the moment the world realized that a new kind of power had arrived, one that didn't just want to defeat you, but wanted to delete you from the map. This is the account of how one man, born with nothing in the freezing void of the steppe, decided to dismantle the greatest empire in Central Asia, brick by brick, life by life. And it all started because one ruler thought he was safe behind his walls. He wasn't. The pyramid at Nishapur is the most honest thing the Mongols ever built. To understand the scale of what happened, you have to stop thinking of war as a series of battles. For the Mongol army, war was an industrial process. When Nishapur fell, the order wasn't just to kill, it was to ensure that life could never return. The soldiers didn't just swing swords, they walked through the ruins with tally sticks. They needed to know the count was accurate. They needed to know that every soul that had breathed inside those walls was now part of the landscape. Why the sorting? Why separate the children from the mothers? Because Genghis Khan did not believe in loose ends. A child left alive is a vengeful man 20 years later. A woman left alive is a memory of a culture that no longer exists. By stacking them in separate piles, the accountants of the steppe could look at the math and confirm. The city of Nishapur is now 0. Nishapur was a jewel. It was a center of turquoise trade, a place of poets and scholars. In under 48 hours, it was turned into a geometric arrangement of rotting flesh. This was not a unique tragedy. It was a template. This was the systematic dismantling of the Khwarazmian Empire, a superpower of its day, spanning from the borders of India to the Caspian Sea. An empire that boasted 400,000 professional soldiers and walls that had stood for centuries. But walls are only as strong as the conviction of the men behind them. The ruler of this empire, Shah Muhammad II, looked at the horizon and saw a barbarian horde. He saw a nuisance. He did not realize he was looking at the end of his world. He thought he was dealing with people who wanted his gold. He didn't understand that the man leading the horde didn't care about gold. He cared about the law of the steppe. And the law of the steppe says that if you break a contract, you are not just a criminal, you are a cancer. And a cancer must be excised completely. Before the first head was severed at Nishapur, there was a choice. There is always a choice. But to understand why the Shah made the wrong one, we have to go back. We have to look at the man who ordered the pyramids built. Long before he was the universal ruler, he was a boy hiding in a frozen river, watching his world burn. Question: why sort the skulls? A. Ritual for Tungri. B. Psychological warfare. C. Zero survivors. D. Military hygiene. Correct answer is C. Reason: erasing future vengeance. Stay with us till the end for valuable insights and more questions. Like, subscribe, and share to support the channel. Before the pyramids of skulls, there was a boy in a river. His name was Temujin. He was 9 years old when his world ended for the first time. His father, a minor chieftain, was poisoned by a rival tribe during a meal. It was a common death on the steppe, quiet, dishonorable, and permanent. In the brutal logic of the Mongolian plateau, a dead leader is no leader at all. Temujin's own clan didn't just abandon him, they hunted him. They saw a 9-year-old boy and his mother as a liability. They left them with nothing. No livestock, no protection, no future. This is the part most people skip. They see Genghis Khan as a force of nature that simply appeared. They forget that the universal ruler spent his teenage years eating roots and rodents to stay alive. He wasn't born a king. He was born a ghost. By the age of 12, Temujin had already committed his first murder. He killed his own half-brother, Bekta, with an arrow over a dispute about a fish. It sounds like a sibling rivalry gone wrong. It wasn't. It was a strategic execution. Bekta was the oldest. He was hoarding food while the family starved. Temujin realized early that in a world of limited resources, sentimentality is a death sentence. But the steppe wasn't done with him. A rival tribe, the Taichiyud, captured him. They didn't kill him, they humiliated him. They put a kang around his neck, a heavy wooden collar that locked his hands and head together. He was a human animal, paraded around like a trophy. Then came the night of the festival. Temujin waited for the guards to get drunk. He used the very collar meant to break him as a weapon, smashing a guard's head and sprinting into the darkness. He didn't run for the mountains. He ran for the river. It was a frozen, black vein of water. Temujin submerged himself, leaving only his nose above the surface. He stayed there for hours while his captors rode past, their torches reflecting off the ice inches from his face. He watched them from under the water. He learned how to be invisible. He learned how to wait. When he finally emerged, he wasn't just a boy anymore. He was a predator who had survived the worst the world could throw at him. He understood that loyalty isn't something you inherit. It's something you build through blood and merit. By the time he was 30, he was no longer running. He was assembling. He was marrying for alliances and fighting for survival. He was doing something no one on the steppe had ever dared. He was promoting men based on how well they fought, not who their father was. In a world of aristocrats, he was a meritocrat, and that made him the most dangerous man alive. Why hide in the river? A. Ritual purification. B. Total invisibility. C. Trackless escape. D. Finding weapons. Correct answer is B. Reason: total concealment from torches. By 1206, the Mongolian plateau was no longer a collection of squabbling tribes. It was a single, sharpened blade. Temujin had done the impossible. He had systematically crushed every rival: the Tartars who poisoned his father, the Merkits who stole his wife, and the Naimans who thought they were his superiors. He didn't just defeat them in the field. He absorbed them. If you were a soldier who fought bravely against him, he didn't execute you. He gave you a horse and a place in his vanguard. If you were a noble who betrayed your own leader to join him, he killed you for being a traitor. The message was clear: loyalty to the Khan was the only currency that mattered. At a great assembly, a Kurultai, the leaders of the steppe gathered. They didn't just give him a title, they gave him a destiny. They named him Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, the Khan of all who live in felt tents. But Genghis knew a fundamental truth about the Mongols: they were a people built for movement. If they stopped moving, they would start fighting each other again. To keep the tribes united, he needed a target. He needed an enemy so large that his people would have to remain a single unit to break them. He turned his eyes toward the south and the west. He didn't just want tribute. He wanted to build a machine. He reorganized the entire Mongol society into a decimal system. The Aban, 10 men, the Zuun, 100, the Minghan, 1,000, and the Tumen, 10,000. It was mathematical. It was cold. It meant that a commander didn't need to know his soldiers' names. He only needed to know their numbers. Discipline became the new religion of the steppe. If one man in an Aban fled from battle, all 10 were executed. If an entire Aban fled, the 100 men of their Zuun were put to the sword. This wasn't cruelty, it was structural integrity. He was turning a nomadic people into the first truly professional military force the world had ever seen. While the rest of the world relied on heavy armor, slow supply wagons, and noble birthrights, Genghis Khan's army traveled light. They carried dried meat and fermented milk. They could ride 60 miles a day, every day, for weeks. They were a ghost army that could appear behind an enemy before the scouts even knew they had crossed the border. By age 40, Genghis Khan was no longer a man. He was a system that was about to collide with the Khwarazmian Empire. The Shah thought he was dealing with a tribal chief. He was actually dealing with the CEO of a global destruction firm. What was the Raban? A. 10-man squad. B. 100-man company. C. 1,000-man regiment. D. 10,000-man division. Correct answer is A. Reason, base unit of the decimal system. In 1218, the world was divided. In the West, Shah Muhammad II sat on a throne of silk and steel. He was the shadow of God on earth. He ruled 400,000 soldiers. In the East, Genghis Khan ruled a nation of hunters. Genghis Khan did not want a war with the Shah. Not yet. He wanted a partner. He sent a trade caravan. It was a gesture of immense wealth and immense restraint. 450 merchants. Hundreds of camels. They were loaded with gold, silver, Chinese silk, and musk. This wasn't just a business deal. It was a bridge. The message Genghis sent was surprisingly humble. I regard you as my most cherished neighbor. Let there be trade between us. Let us establish a bond of friendship. For the Shah, this was a moment of absolute power. He had a choice. He could open his gates, take the taxes, and grow richer than any king in history. Or he could refuse. He did neither. The caravan arrived at the border city of Otrar. The governor there, a man named Inalchik, was the Shah's uncle. He was a man of greed and small vision. When he saw the gold, he didn't see a cherished neighbor. He saw a payday. He accused the 450 merchants of being spies. Maybe they were. In the Mongol world, every merchant was a pair of eyes for the Khan. But in the medieval world, merchants were sacred. They traveled under the seal of the Khan. To touch them was to touch the Khan himself. Inalchik didn't just arrest them. He slaughtered them. Every single one. 450 men executed in cold blood. Their goods were seized. Their bodies were dumped. One man escaped. A lone survivor crawled back across the desert to tell Genghis Khan that his friendship had been answered with a massacre. Genghis Khan still did not attack. He gave the Shah one last chance to fix it. He sent 3 ambassadors. Their demand was simple: give us Inalchik. Let us punish the man who broke the law. If you hand over the governor, the empire lives. The Shah looked at the ambassadors. He saw nomads. He saw men who smelled of horse sweat and leather. He decided to send a message of his own. He killed the lead ambassador, a Muslim, just like the Shah. The other 2, he didn't kill. He did something worse. He burned their beards and shaved their heads. On the steppe, a man's beard is his honor. To shave a man was to turn him into a slave. He sent them back on foot to tell their Khan that the Shah was not afraid. When those 2 mutilated men reached the Mongol camp, the air went cold. Genghis Khan didn't scream. He didn't call for a charge. He climbed a mountain alone. He stayed there for 3 days and 3 nights. When he came down, the universal ruler had made his decision. The Khwarazmian Empire was no longer a neighbor. It was a target. Why shave the ambassadors? A. Hygienic military ritual. B. Mark of subjugation. C. Religious conversion act. D. Identification for border. Correct answer is B. Reason: deliberate humiliation of Mongol honor. Shah Muhammad II had a plan. He had 400,000 men. The Mongols had barely 150,000. On paper, the Shah was invincible. He decided to play a defensive game. He broke his massive army into pieces, garrisoning every major city: Otrar, Bukhara, Samarkand. He thought, let them exhaust themselves against my walls. Let them starve in the heat. It was a beautiful plan. It was also his suicide note. Genghis Khan didn't play by the rules of Persian warfare. He didn't march down the main roads. He split his army into 4 columns. 3 were visible, moving like a slow-moving storm toward the border cities. The Shah watched them, obsessed with their movements. He felt safe. He believed the Kizilkum Desert, a 100,000 square mile wasteland of salt and death, was an impassable wall. No army in history had ever crossed it. To enter the Kizilkum was to choose a slow death by thirst. Genghis Khan chose the desert. While the Shah's generals were focused on the border, Genghis and his youngest son, Tului, led 50,000 men into the deep sand. They didn't carry massive supply trains. They rode hardy Mongol horses that could find moisture in the scrub. They drank horse blood when the water ran out. They moved in total silence, a ghost army navigating by the stars. When they emerged on the other side, they weren't at the border. They were in the heart of the empire. They appeared behind the Shah's lines at Bukhara. The psychological impact was terminal. Imagine waking up to find the enemy you thought was weeks away standing at your back door. The city of Bukhara, a center of science and Islamic culture for 3 centuries, was paralyzed. The garrison fled. The civilians opened the gates, hoping for mercy. Genghis Khan rode his horse into the courtyard of the great mosque. He didn't burn it immediately. He looked at the scholars and the wealthy elite and told them, I am the flail of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you. Then, the bookkeeping began. Bukhara was stripped. The silver was taken. The young men were gathered. But they weren't killed, not yet. They were turned into kasha, human shields. The Mongols marched them toward the next city, forcing them to carry the ladders and take the first volleys of arrows. The Shah's own subjects were being used to break the Shah's own walls. The empire was no longer a state. It was a harvest. Why cross the Kizilkum? A. Shorter supply route. B. Strategic rear assault. C. Access to gold. D. Finding hidden water. Correct answer is B. Reason: bypassing defenses to strike the interior. The Shah was no longer a ruler. He was a fugitive. As Samarkand fell, the jewel of his empire, with its 40-foot walls and 110,000 defenders, Muhammad II did the one thing a shadow of God should never do. He ran. He abandoned his mother, his wives, and his people. He fled west, hoping the distance would save him. Genghis Khan did not let him go. He turned to his 2 most trusted dogs of war, Jebe and Subutai. He gave them 20,000 men and a single order: pursue the Shah. Do not stop until he is dead. What followed was one of the greatest cavalry chases in human history. Jebe and Subutai rode across 2,000 miles of enemy territory. They didn't stop to besiege cities unless they had to. They bypassed strongholds. They changed horses mid-gallop. They were a shadow that the Shah could never outrun. Every city the Shah touched became a target. If a city gave him bread, the Mongols burned it. If a city closed its gates to him, the Mongols executed its leaders for failing to surrender to the Khan. The Shah was a plague carrier, bringing death to every province he entered. By December 1220, the man who had commanded 400,000 soldiers was alone. He reached a small, rocky island in the Caspian Sea. He was sick with pleurisy. His clothes were rags. He had no crown, no gold, and no empire left to see. According to the chronicles, he died in a tent made of old felt, asking his few remaining servants if any of his sons had survived. He died a beggar on an island of salt. Back on the mainland, the calculus of death reached its final total. The Mongols didn't just kill the Shah, they deleted his legacy. They diverted the Amu Darya River to flow over the ruins of his capital, Gurgunj, so that the very earth would forget where the city had stood. They dismantled the irrigation systems that had fed Central Asia for 1,000 years. When the campaign began, the region was the heart of the Islamic Golden Age. When it ended 18 months later, the population had dropped by an estimated 75%. The libraries of Bukhara were ash. The gardens of Samarkand were graveyards. This wasn't a war of conquest. It was a mechanical removal of a civilization that had insulted a higher power. Genghis Khan didn't hate the Shah. You don't hate the dust you wipe off your boots. You just ensure that the surface is clean. The pyramids of skulls at Nishapur were the final period at the end of a very long, very bloody sentence. The world had learned a lesson that would last for 7 centuries. Never kill the Khan's messengers. Because the man who sent them does not negotiate with the past. He simply creates a new future out of the bones of those who stood in his way. What happened to Gurgunj? A. Turned into capital. B. Flooded by river. C. Sold to merchants. D. Left untouched. Correct answer is B. Reason: total erasure of the city's physical existence. If you enjoy dark untold history, subscribe because we uncover what others won't.